There's one reason where the Iowa defense won't be elite once again in 2024. What is it? Today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs have finished up, the sports, they just stopped sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Kicking things off today as we continue our conversation on the Iowa Hawkeyes, going position by position. And today we take a look at maybe the most important part of the Iowa defense. Obviously, Iowa throughout the years has had great linebackers, including as good of a tandem as anybody in college football coming back this year in Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. The defensive backfield is star-studded once again, even after the loss of Cooper DeJean. But for me, the importance lies up front, and it's what you see with that defensive line. A defensive line that has put a ton of prospects into the NFL over the last 15 years. You look at just the sheer volume of guys that have played for a long time in the league. It is one of the strengths. Yes, it's talked about as tight end U. We talk about that, the defensive backs and on that have gone on to the league. Think of the great offensive linemen that come through Iowa, but defensive line is really the backbone of this football program. And without the defensive line play that we've seen, this defense would not be what it is, and certainly the elite level of the last couple of years. So you come into a season losing one of your all-timers in Joe Evans, a self-made guy who came in after playing quarterback at Ames High, makes the right decision to make his way to Iowa City and built himself into, from one point, a situational rush end to a four-down defensive lineman, and that's what he turned into and put together a monster senior season. Now you lose him, and you're wondering where the pass rush is going to come from. But when you're talking about the concern, before we kind of get into the individual pieces of this defensive line, my concerns lie with the depth of this position. We've talked about this in the past. What led to Iowa struggling so much going back to 2010? After the Orange Bowl year of 2009, so many returning starters coming back. The biggest component to that was the defensive line. The defensive line didn't have the depth. The starters were elite, but they didn't have the depth. Go back to 2005, and people were wondering what was going to happen with that squad. After a 2004 season, another top 10 finish, their third consecutive top 10 year. One of the issues was the youth of what they had up front. Even returning Abdul Hodge and Chad Greenway at the linebacker position, they were too green up front, and it led to some of the struggles in 2005. And when you look at this season that has many of the same expectations of 2005 and 2010, you have these similar type of expectations for this year's squad, and the lack of depth, at least that we know about right now, at defensive line is the issue. So you start up front and you start, I believe, with Deontay Craig. Deontay Craig has put together a very nice season. It was an injury-rattled year a year ago in 2023. I think you're going to have a monster bounce-back performance from Craig this year. I think he's going to be all Big Ten. I think he's going to be approaching double digits in terms of sacks. He is going to be the guy that is going to be a huge component to this team. He is joined up front by Ethan Hurkett, who we saw a year ago make some plays outside. He had some big ones. He is also backed up by Max Llewellyn. Both those guys built themselves up, local kids. Cedar Rapids Xavier for Hurkett. Llewellyn comes in from Urbandale. Two Iowa kids that have built themselves into nice rotational pieces for this squad. And then you look at the middle, and you're in good shape there. Y.A. Black played his best season of football a year ago for the Hawkeyes, and what he meant in the middle, playing that gap scheme in the middle of that defense, occupying space. He did a great job. He's a monster of a man at 6'5", 317 pounds, and a healthy season. He played with the shoulder injury a year ago. The crazy thing is, after that shoulder, which could have been devastating, maybe season-ending for a lot of different players, for Y.A. Black, I thought his play even improved after that shoulder injury, getting him healthy. And then Aaron Graves, and we're still waiting for Aaron Graves. He came in with a lot of hype, a lot behind him. Small school kid that comes in here. He was a big-time recruit. Could have gone most anywhere he wanted in the country. He decided to stay home very early in his recruitment for the Hawkeyes. And he's been a nice piece, but we need another step. We need Aaron Graves to be a butt kicker every single snap this season, and I think the opportunity is there. The starting rotation looks great. The question, as mentioned, is in terms of depth, and certainly in the middle of that. So when you're looking at the defensive tackle spot, your number 3 defensive tackle is Jeremiah Pittman. We've seen Pittman play a little bit, 6'3", 293. He's not a monster by any means, but he's got decent size there in the middle. He's got to put it together, and he's got to be a guy that I think at minimum this year, they have to be able to count on to play 20, 25 snaps a game. I think that's minimum for Jeremiah Pittman this season. You continue on, and then it really gets shaky after that, because when you're talking about the defensive tackle position, there just isn't a whole lot there. You're either talking about one of the youngsters taking a step forward. Is it one of the walk-ons that take a big jump? Can Maddox Borcherding Johnson be that guy? From what I've heard, he's not ready to be a piece that can help out rotationally at the defensive tackle spot. Can Jeff Bowie finally put it together out of West Branch? Can he be the guy this season that goes out there and can be rotational? And maybe the most intriguing when you're talking about inside, and I haven't heard a ton about to this point, is Chase Brackney. Comes in from Colorado a year ago, redshirted this past season. He's got the size, 6'4", already up to 291 pounds. You love to see that. Again, we're looking for rotational pieces. Maybe Brackney can be the guy that can be that. Obviously, Iowa brought in a ton of defensive linemen this past season. You look at the freshman class. Most of these guys are targeted probably for defensive end. Maybe a guy can move inside. Certainly probably not this season. Devin Kennedy is the one that you start with, though. Out of Arizona, the bloodlines, his dad, Jimmy Kennedy, an All-American and a good player at Penn State, and went on and had a long NFL career. He's one that you definitely take a look at that can help out. Other freshmen coming in this year. Drew Campbell, obviously the younger brother of Jack Campbell. He's a guy that I think has a chance to be really good. Chimichinike, another one out of Texas. Joseph Anderson, also with NFL bloodlines out of St. Louis. A lot of good stuff there. They're young, and it's very difficult. We just don't see it happen very often. The youth playing at defensive line. Finally, another couple of guys I need to mention here when we're talking about this defensive line. Brian Allen. Talk about getting to the quarterback. He's popped now 2 straight spring practices. He's looked very good, including this past year. You go back to Kids Day last August. It felt like they were going to be able to find a way to keep him off the field. They did kind of keep him off the field. Just didn't see enough about Brian Allen. Iowa, the way that they practice, the way that they work, you have to do all the little things right at the defensive line position. Maybe it was just a case for Brian Allen, wasn't able to do those little things in terms of getting to the quarterback, though. He's shown that ability. I think he's going to be one that you can count on. Caden Crawford, another defensive lineman. We'll see inside, outside, 6'4", 261 out of Kansas. He's a guy in his second season now as a sophomore. Probably need to see a jump forward out of him. So those are some of the names that we're talking about. Heard some good things about Ryan Kennan, a walk-on defensive lineman from West Des Moines Valley, 6'3", 271. He's a guy potentially maybe can become a rotational piece. And certainly if he can get bigger and play that defensive tackle spot, that'd be another one to keep an eye on. But that's what we have at the defensive line. We're going to talk more football as we continue here. Locked On Hawkeyes. We got Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com is going to jump by. We got some basketball. He's at an AAU event watching Jack McCaffery. Question on him. We know that Jack McCaffery isn't going to be a Hawkeye. At least that's what he said. Want to get Tom's perspective on that. We're going to talk some hoops and some football with Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. It's the week of Big Ten football media days. He'll be there as well. And we'll have coverage for you as well from Big Ten football media days. Tom Kakert as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But the playoffs have finished up in basketball and hockey. We're just getting fewer games. And when the sports just aren't sporting like I want them to, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up big bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. That's for new and existing customers at FanDuel. You want to take a look at the Iowa Hawkeyes odds to make the college football playoff, plus 680. To win the Big Ten, 40-1. Oh, you got you covered there. Iowa State line is up. Iowa, just a slight 2.5-point favorite. Baseball, they got you covered. We got, of course, the games right around the corner. There's so much going on, and FanDuel has you covered. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And we're joined by Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. Tom, know you're watching some AAU basketball. Let's start on the hoops recruiting front. Is there any possibility that Jack McCaffery will look back at his decision and make the decision, you know what, maybe I do need to look at Iowa a little bit more? Is that a 0% chance? Is this just done? Or could there be at least a glimmer of hope that he decides, you know what, I am going to play for my dad?
About 6 months ago, some folks close to the program kind of hinted that to me, but that's dead now. Okay. It's just not happening. There were some people who kind of thought, you know what, he's probably going to reconsider, but everything I have been told is that Jack is full steam ahead, and it was a family decision that he just needed to move on. It was just as you can imagine, Connor and Patrick enjoyed playing for their father. Everything else around it just kind of wasn't as enjoyable at times.
Sure.
And so Jack got a front row seat for it and heard all about it. So he just doesn't want to have to experience that.
No, makes sense. Well, let's kind of recap your week as the Iowa media and the Iowa fan base through the Iowa media, and thanks to the basketball programs and Cade McNamara, et cetera, making themselves available. It was great content this week. So I believe Monday was the men's team. So let's start there. Just one or two of your recollections from earlier in this week as you talked to some of the players and saw some of them. Back to Monday, Tom, first of all.
Yeah, I was on vacation Monday, so gotcha. I did not make that one, but just looking at some of the content, we had Al Huseman over there covering it for us. I had taken kind of a long weekend vacation with the family. That's about all I can get these days. I'm really interested in this men's team. Just really am, because I think they could be better than people think.
Yep, me too.
But I think getting Peyton back was a huge deal. I think they've got some interesting pieces, and it's going to depend on how good some of those pieces are. But if the Troy kid's good and Dembale's better, Owen Freeman shows me a jump shot, Brock Harding's jump shot's better, all those things come to fore. Boy, it's an interesting team then with Peyton Sanford and Josh Dix.
I like the roster. I like the makeup. We kind of talk about that front court and the loaded, forward positions, if you will. How does Laje Dembale fit in? We think Cooper Koch is going to see minutes.
Yep.
Troy Orr is going to see minutes. You have a lot of front court guys. What's sophomore year look like for Laje Dembale?
I think you brought up Cooper. I think Cooper's probably a 3, and I think he's probably filling in with, behind Peyton Sanford. And there might be times where they both play together. But if you want to get some more shooting on the floor, some more scoring threats. But Dembale is bigger. I mean, he told me a couple weeks ago when I talked to him that he was up to 252. And, so he put on about 20 pounds of muscle. And you can tell in his upper body that he just looks bigger and stronger. And says he's focused on rebounding, which I thought was kind of a weakness for him last year. I just didn't think he rebounded great. So if he can become a better rebounder and, continue to develop his outside shot, boy, he's an interesting player. And Troy is just athletic as heck. And I think he and Felwell are going to help them defensively a whole lot this year as well. And I know Trent will giggle a bit at this, but there's a lot of talk of defense when you talk to those players.
Sure.
I'm going to believe it when I see it.
Yes.
But there's a lot of talk about it.
I love it. I think they're going to exceed everybody's especially with the expectations were in April. Well, there were none other than it's God. Look out below. I think Fran McCaffery did a great job late in the go round of building that roster. All right, let's finish up with basketball, but let's move to the women before we get to Cade McNamara and what we think you're going to hear or see next week in Indianapolis. Just a takeaway or two from the women's availability. Jan Jensen running the practice. I believe I saw somewhere that Bluter was actually there as a spectator. Any takeaways from that, Tom?
The first time we were there that day, and it was the first time Lisa had been to practice, and she'd retired. So it was weird. It was weird seeing Lisa there. It was weird the first time we went and not seeing Lisa there. So it's going to take some time to get used to that because she was such a presence on that sideline for so long. I think people have to realize Lucy Olson is not going to be Caitlin Clark, and the sooner they do that, the sooner they're going to probably enjoy her. She's more of a mid-range game. She's more of a pass first. She's really good with the basketball in her hands, really creative, gets to the rim, even though she's not as big. She's, probably 5'9" or so. I really like two of the two freshmen from Wisconsin, Tegan Mulaney and Taylor Strumlow. I think they're both going to help. I think this is it's an NCAA team, maybe a Sweet 16 team. That might be ceiling for them, I think, unless something really surprises. The thing that they're probably going to have the biggest concern about is 3-point shooting, just because Taylor McCabe's really the only knockdown 3-point shooter that they have. Kelly Feuerbach can be up and down. Sid can make it, but she's not going to be known as a 3-point shooter. So I think that's the biggest difference. Is you had the ultimate bomber for 4 years, Caitlin Clark, and now you don't have someone like that on this roster, and that's or someone who is a creative and just hit from anywhere on the floor. You don't have that with this team.
I heard Chad Leistikow on with you earlier this week on your podcast as you guys went through your over-unders for football. Also a little basketball talk, though, and mentioned Jada Gyamfi. I called, 40 of her games probably in high school.
Where at, Trent?
At Johnston. Well, it started at Urbandale, and she transferred to Johnston. Saw her a ton. Hasn't been able to crack the rotation. A possibility we'll see Jada out there a little bit, at least at minimum this season?
Yeah, I think she's going to be potentially in the rotation. Top 8 player, I think, is probably where she's at. Can plug in there behind Sita Folter or Hannah, either of those. She's got a really nice looking jump shot that's pretty consistent. Just not that physical. And she keeps everybody loose.
Yeah, she does.
And that's important. She is just I don't think she ever has a bad day. She's just always enjoying herself, and I think every team needs that, somebody to keep things loose when things get tight, and she really does a good job of that.
Let's move to football. Cade McNamara, you guys had an opportunity to speak with him for the first time in a long time. He's put on weight, he's lost some weight, but he's going to be heavier than he was to start last year's season. Your thoughts on the QB1?
Well, it was interesting because when we saw him in April just doing some stuff, I did think he was heavy, and then he did confirm he'd been up to 225, but he put on kind of just bulk, mass, kind of weight, strength weight more than anything else, and now he's kind of leaned down to 205, 210 was where he wants to be, and he did look leaner. Says he feels better than he did at any point last year. So that's a positive. I don't think they would have let him go out there and play in that softball game if they had concerns about him. So I think from all those aspects, I think he's ready to go now. It's just keeping him healthy. That's the thing. You just got to keep him healthy. The other thing, though, they're better in the backup position now. You know what I mean? Last year, they just didn't have anything that was proven. Brendan Sullivan's played in the Big Ten. He knows what it takes. He's had good games in the Big Ten. Last year, Iowa kind of dominated him in that game, but that they went head-to-head, but he had some good games as a starter at Northwestern. So they've got somebody who they can plug in there and potentially play if Cade does have health issues.
Another, I thought, eye-opening part of your guys' availability with the team earlier in the week, talking with Jennings Dunker, and he's goofy and funny and all the things, and he's got the hairdo going now. But he was up to 350 pounds last year, and he's down to 315. Now, I would guess he anticipated he was going to be a guard last year and got bumped out to tackle, but getting him with that size, the strength that he has, and if he can move a little bit better, because you saw Tom last year, there were just certain edge rushers he wasn't fast enough for. Down at 315, maybe that changes things at right tackle.
Yeah, and I think he wants to get down lower. I think he's probably looking at like 310 is where he wants to be. So, so I'm interested to see what he does. The other thing that was, I think, interesting, Logan Jones kind of mentioned Bo Stevens being the other guard. So it sounds like, at least on paper right now, that the O-line's going to be Richmond, Stevens, Jones, Colby, Dunker. Mm-hmm. That's going to be your five. And you look back at last year, 4 of those 5 guys got hurt last year. The only one that was really healthy was Colby. Mason Richmond was moving around like I do. That's not good, folks. If you're listening, that's not good. I don't move that well at my age. So the second half of the year, he was just struggling. Logan Jones was struggling. Dunker had shoulder surgery after the season. That's why he's not doing the hay bale toss this year. It's this weekend. And Bo Stevens had a ton of different injuries early on last year and during the season. So I think he got hurt again at the Northwestern game, come to think of it. So, yeah, so if they can keep that group healthy, that's a lot of experience, and I kind of like to look at that group.
Big Ten Media Days, Indianapolis, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I know that the years that I've been, Delaney would start things off by meeting the media. Do we expect Petitti to do similar? And is there a topic that you want to hear him address? Is expansion with the Big 12 and what may be going on or the Big Ten rather, and what may be going on in the ACC? I mean, is there anything that makes you have to be in the auditorium to hear Petitti, or is it going to be is it maybe a pass?
Yeah, I'm not going over till Tuesday night, so I'm going to just do the Iowa day, and there's just not a lot for me to do.
And Big Ten Media Network's got everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's just kind of silly. I can sit at home and handle things, but I am curious to see what he thinks of like the House case and how that's being settled, and what they should do with how the Big Ten is viewing that money. I'm curious what his thoughts on private equity becoming part of some of the conferences, naming rights for conferences like the All-State 12 that potentially might happen. There's a lot of things. In fact, I asked Matt Weitzel, sports information director for Iowa, if we get some time with Beth Getz while we're there on Wednesday too, because there's just so many housekeeping items. I mean, I'm curious about this new proposal to go to 105 scholarship players for football. I mean, boy, you want to talk about a transfer portal that gets busy every year? Well, do that. Do that.
Yeah,
it's gonna be goofy. It's gonna be crazy. It does not solve the problem. It only makes it worse.
I think so.
If you want to address some of those things. So anyway, there's a lot. It's just so many unanswered questions right now.
Tom, always recruiting news happening. And of course, you guys have it covered over at HawkeyeReport.com. The best kicker in the country has committed to the Hawkeyes. Yeah. What can you tell us about Scott Starzik?
Scott Starzik, best kicker in the country. And, he's coming in, and he's, Drew Stevens got another year, but he's coming in to compete with him. So that'll be interesting. Competition's never a bad thing. But regardless, then he can just, redshirt if he doesn't win the job. And, Yeah, that's a good get for Iowa. I thought he was going to end up at Syracuse and kick in a dome and not have to worry about all that stuff, but he wants to come kick for the Hawks. So, yeah, that's what you have to do these days, guys. You have to offer kickers.
Yeah.
Can't give them the walk on anymore.
Nope. A different world. What can you tell us the
Well,
latest?
if it goes to 105, then you'll be offering kickers for sure.
For sure.
Going to have a couple of them on, maybe even 3 at different times.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about Jose Epinesa? Feels like it's not trending in a positive direction for Iowa.
Yeah, it definitely hasn't been for a while. Miami seems to, I think, kind of be, I don't want to say clear leader, but certainly the leader at this point. Certainly they're out front. Utah probably running the 2-hole, and then I think Iowa's probably third at this point. And it seems like he wants to make a decision before the end of the month, so we may get that answer. I still keep thinking, boy, the blood thicker than water kind of thing, and that he ends up just sticking close to what his brothers have done, but maybe not. Maybe he's the last of the bunch, and he wants to carve his own path in the world. And I know both Miami has a Polynesian D-line coach, and so does Utah, and the Epinesa family has deep connections with both those guys. So it's not like he's going to some rando place for a buck. There's some ties there too.
That's Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. Some maybe disappointing news coming there from Jose Epinesa. A lot of good stuff on the recruiting front in Iowa with the number 1 kicker in the country in Starzik, who will be coming in next season. Well, speaking of this upcoming season, we got some good news. Well, good news if you got your hands on some ducats. Hawkeye fans, you did it again. We continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? And do you have to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Well, it's time to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hawkeye fans did it again. It is a sellout for the season. There was just one game remaining. It was the matchup October 12th against Washington that had tickets going into the weekend, and that is over. It is a full season sellout once again inside Kinnick Stadium. We talked about this a bit last week. There is something special about Kinnick Stadium. I still get chills every time I walk in the building. That first time every year, it gets me, and it'll be a sellout. Illinois State, the opener on August 31st. Iowa State after that. The Troy game. All those games back to back to back after a road trip to Minnesota bye and another road trip to Ohio State. They're back home for Washington after that. Northwestern, October 26th. Wisconsin on November 2nd. And the finale, Black Friday against Nebraska on November 29th. So your only place to get seats are on places away from the ticket office. And you can find them, of course, on the Game Time app, as you can find your Iowa football tickets for the upcoming season. No surprise, expectations are high for this team, and I'm right there with you. I think this team has a chance to have a really special football season. Well, with that, we talked about defensive line. Last week, we hit on quarterbacks and went through in our positional breakdown. We will continue this week. We'll kind of bounce back and forth between offense and defense here in the coming weeks as we get ready for August camp. Big Ten football media days. Iowa goes on Wednesday. We'll have full coverage as well from that, and Big Ten media days over in Indianapolis. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll be back with you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.